Our young brother Elijah was just a teenager when he faced a life-changing situation. Here's his story.
So how can we continue to be faithful in spite of our human weaknesses?
Growing up, I had absolutely no health problems at all. And I loved playing basketball, and I enjoyed my life in the congregation.
This was a kid who had his whole life in front of him, and it was taken away in a moment.
November of 2019, I was diagnosed with a massive brain tumor. I'm saying, why me? Did I do something wrong? I wanted to know why it had to happen now. At 16, I'm close to 18, what I think is the prime of my life. The night before I was going to have surgery was probably one of the scariest nights of my life. So I wanted to be able to still do the things I loved, and I really just didn't want my life to end. The account of David, that was one that was very prominent in my mind. There was many times in his life where he had to fight foes that were very scary and life-threatening, and this situation I was dealing with was pretty scary and life-threatening, but I knew Jehovah had my back.
We're watching the story of Elijah Vega as it appears in the May 2023 JW Broadcasting episode. This is a disturbing testimonial. I mean, you have the usual manipulative ingredients of the soft piano music that's intended to play to people's emotions so that they can more easily swallow the narrative that's being fed to them of loyalty to God under any circumstances being the most important thing. But when you strip away all of that manipulative stuff, what you have here is a deeply disturbing story, which in the context of what we've already heard in this particular episode of JW Broadcasting, splits wide apart any notion of divine intervention or God having any involvement whatsoever, frankly, in human affairs. So we had Elijah give the heartbreaking account of being diagnosed at the age of 16 with a brain tumor.
November of 2019, I was diagnosed with a massive brain tumor. I wanted to know why it had to happen now. At 16, I'm close to 18, what I think is the prime of my life.
So a 16-year-old Jehovah's Witness has a brain tumor, and it's life-threatening. He could easily lose his life. Predictably, the blood issue is going to come into play here. He's going to have to make a decision as to whether he wants to compromise and accept medical treatment with blood, even if it may save his life, or go down some other route of refusing blood and accepting medical alternatives. Spoiler alert, it's never really clarified to what extent blood was an issue. But let's just remember what Stephen Lett has said in this very episode of JW Broadcasting.
Now today, we don't expect Jehovah's angels to deliver us miraculously, but Jehovah can use them to maneuver circumstances. So we find a job to provide for our family.
So Jehovah is in the business, through his angels, of finding Jehovah's Witnesses jobs, helping them with their employment so that they'll find suitable employment that will help them attend all their meetings. He does that sort of thing. But he's not going to stop a 16-year-old having a brain tumor. I'm sorry, that makes no sense whatsoever. Or more to the point, as I've repeatedly argued, if that's truly the case, then Jehovah is very messed up. The very least you could say is that he has woeful prioritization skills.
We talked about getting the brothers from HLC there to back us up with the alternatives on his card.
The doctor was impressed when he asked Elijah if he had any questions. And Elijah asked him a couple of questions about the procedure and then also brought up the blood issue. This showed the doctor that this was a young man who had his own stand, his own convictions.
If Jehovah tells me that blood is sacred, then I'm listening.
Elijah kept on reminding us that even if he doesn't wake up on this surgery bed, no matter what happens, he's still gonna wake up, whether it's now or in the future in paradise.
They finally came out only to tell us that there was complication.
Elijah fell into a coma, and we were waiting on answers that the doctors weren't able to give us.
It was roughly about close to 5 months that he was in a coma.
However, Jehovah kept providing the friends, the support. We kept getting texts telling us just how many friends were praying for Elijah and for all of us to get through this.
So this poor lad ended up in a coma for 5 months. And you have to ask the question, because it's not clarified in any way, shape or form in this testimonial, even though they bring up the blood issue. You know, we're not the ones mentioning the blood issue. They're the ones who mention it. They're the ones who put a HLC goon on camera as a talking head, helping us understand this story. And yet they neglect to indicate to what extent the blood issue may have led or not led to these complications that resulted in Elijah being in a coma for 5 months. Why can't you clarify that? It's a simple piece of information. It's a huge gap in the narrative, and frankly, it insults the audience for them to miss this information out, even though they are making a big deal of the blood issue.
The doctor was impressed when he asked Elijah if he had any questions. And Elijah asked him a couple of questions about the procedure and then also brought up the blood issue. This showed the doctor that this was a young man who had his own stand, his own convictions.
If Jehovah tells me that blood is sacred, then I'm listening.
He had his own stand, did he, Peter? Peter Bruzzesi from the Hospital Liaison Committee. Apologies if I've mispronounced your name. Elijah had his own stand. It was his own decision. It's not like he was being threatened with death at Armageddon if he committed the sin of taking someone else's blood into his body. It's not like he was being threatened with disassociation if he, quote, willfully and unrepentantly accepted blood, which is what it says in the chapter on disassociation in the secret Shepherd the Flock of God book that's in Peter's briefcase, but that he doesn't show to doctors and medical staff when he's inserting himself in these life or death matters. Why do they need to lie? Why do they need to be shameful about this? Why can't they just be upfront with medical professionals in life or death situations? You know, these are doctors who are trying to save people and trying to assist, in this case, a young lad who has a brain tumor in a way that will allow him to continue with a good quality of life. And rather than be upfront and say, you know, Elijah is in this situation where we believe if he accepts blood, he's worthy of death at Armageddon. And we'll be honest with you, if he changes his mind as a Jehovah's Witness and at the last minute decides that he wants a blood transfusion, we'll disassociate him. So he will have repercussions. Why can't they be upfront about it? If it's something they're so proud about, we're Jehovah's Witnesses, we obey God's command on blood. Why can't you be upfront about the fact that it isn't really a case of individual or personal choice? Elijah was going into this incredibly difficult situation, having his decisions made for him by a group that persuades people to die rather than accept blood.
Spring of 2020 is when I gradually began to wake up. It's way harder to move around as I used to. Super painful and hard. I have ataxia as of right now, temporarily in my right hand. So I'm not able to perform certain activities as well as I would like to. In my heart, I love basketball, and I wish I could participate, but knowing I can't because of something I can't control physically, it's really hard on me. Job, he was always a great example in the Bible to me. I view him in a totally different light now because he was also hit with a medical issue. But he managed to maintain his faith, and Jehovah eventually blessed Job for that.
Since the coma, Elijah's zeal definitely hasn't lessened. If anything, it's increased.
He gives a whole new meaning to widening out because we want to be as zealous and as busy in the ministry as he is.
Elijah has not accomplished any of this in his own strength. He very quickly will give credit to Jehovah, but also will give credit to his family for the amount of support that he's received, and give credit to the brothers and sisters for the support he's received from them as well. He's been engaged in the field ministry, and he's been active in doing whatever assignments we give him within the congregation. We were able to appoint him a ministerial servant. He's got all of this support. He knows that Jehovah's with him, and in that sense, Jehovah truly is at his right hand.
I know that we have a hope that Jehovah has given us in the future, a perfect life. It gives me a goal and more of a motivation to help everyone reach that goal and get there. There's light at the end of the tunnel. So I thank Jehovah for that so much.
Elijah, you are a precious gem in Jehovah's eyes.
How tragic. It's just heartbreaking, isn't it? To consider, well, again, so much is being left out of this story, and it's wrong to speculate, quite frankly, as to whether the situation would have been different if blood transfusions had not been an issue for Elijah. But how tragic that this huge health issue that Elijah has faced, at the very least, is being exploited by the organization for propaganda value and milked to death to get across this message that faithfulness and loyalty to the organization is paramount. And to add insult to injury, you know, you have this HLC goon who's again being used as a talking head. For me, he's giving off very kind of politician vibes. He doesn't really have sincerity, you know, from my perspective. He comes across as a very fake, superficial individual, and maybe it's just the way he comports himself. Maybe he can't help it. But he is describing the whole situation as though it's a win because Elijah is now a ministerial servant. Oh, never mind the fact that you were in a coma for 5 months. Never mind that you've been through this massive ordeal. We've made you a servant. As though that in any way makes up for the fact that this young man can't play basketball, even though he loves it. You know, that was heartbreaking for me. I can't imagine how frustrating it would be for me as someone in his 40s to not be able to play football when I love football, and I'm in my 40s. This young man has his whole life ahead of him, and he has to watch on while his friends play basketball. But it's okay because they've made him a servant. And we're told that Jehovah is by his side. He's at his right hand. Well, where was Jehovah when the brain tumor first surfaced? Why wasn't Jehovah doing something in that situation? Even though we've learned again in this very JW Broadcasting episode that Jehovah is the sort of God who arranges for his angels to find Jehovah's Witnesses employment.